Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Fry, and welcome to the Space Between podcast number 2. Today, I have the great privilege of speaking with Sarah. For everyone.
Do you want my full name, or do you just want Sarah Parker?
Let's go with Sarah Parker.
The brilliance of this understanding is that our professional obligation is to point you back to your innate well-being. We already see your well-being. We know that you're not broken. This understanding unleashes profound inner freedom that is sustainable and life-changing. Please consider working with one of the other coaches on my YouTube channel or me. I am at your service. Let's talk a little bit about Sarah. Well of Being is the name of her coaching practice and is based on a commitment to the compassionate pursuit of mental well-being. She believes anyone can achieve greater resilience and mental clarity through a basic understanding of our human nature. Sarah's wealth of knowledge and experience makes Well of Being very special and unique. Sarah is a BACP accredited counselor, EMDR therapist, and a certified change coach with Amy Johnson, Ph.D. With years of experience both within the NHS and private practice, her expert knowledge is combined with her passion for creating a uniquely thoughtful and compassionate coaching service, pointing people to their innate health. She has always cared deeply about helping others, but soon realized her passion lay outside her original field as a podiatrist. She decided to focus her attention on mental well-being, something she found personally and professionally rewarding. She also trained in compassion-focused therapy. She has used this approach throughout her work, helping clients to overcome trauma. These years of experience profoundly illuminate her work at Well of Being. The concept of innate health is key to Well of Being, and indeed to Sarah. Being introduced to this understanding helped Sarah both within her job and within her daily life. It has proved transformational and has successfully helped many on their journey to finding lasting mental well-being. Hello, everyone, and today I'm with Sarah Parker. She is in the United Kingdom. Sarah, thank you so much for being here. It's a true pleasure and an honor.
Thank you for inviting me, Dave. I'm really excited to be here with you today talking.
So what's interesting is that we met just randomly on a coaching call, like a coaching, like a webinar type of thing for coaches, and through Amy Johnson. And yeah. I don't remember the details, but I remember me being pretty wound up, pretty caught up in my thinking, trying to figure out, the best way to reach people and share in this absolutely beautiful understanding. And I could feel myself getting really, really wound up, which comes across to me as nervousness, kind of anxiousness. And I remember you just being really calm and just being point blank and just telling me, look, Dave, just do it, just focus and do it. And I was like, who is that woman?
Who is that woman?
Seriously, it was impressive. I mean, it really, I felt so I felt like somebody had my back. That's what I felt like. I felt like there was somebody just patting me on the back going, it's okay. It's okay. We've all been there. Just go ahead and do it.
Just go ahead and be you, Dave, because actually, we can do all sorts of, and I think that's what I want you to see. Whilst you might feel anxious or you might have felt anxious, what I saw was a man that just wanted to share and help people. And of course you can do that, because just like you felt the pat on the back from me, when we care deeply and when we truly want to share something that we see is helpful, people know that. And I wanted you to see that actually being you will get people around you. It will be what brings in your work and what brings in the people to share this with, because they're not coming for, any of the clever tricks. They're coming for you.
I appreciate that so much. Can you tell me how you feel or about this understanding, how you share this understanding?
Dave, I think it's kind of changed over time. When I first came across this understanding, I was a little bit clumsy with it, and I was probably a little bit overexcitable about it and wanted the world to know. And it's developed its own life over time. My sharing of this understanding with, talking to the likes of you, to Amy Johnson, to other people who also share this, has meant that collective sharing has created something in me. And the way I share it is from my heart. It's as simple as that. And just like today, we knew we were going to meet today at this time, but neither of us have any words planned, and yet they're flowing. And I think that it's trusting that. It's rather than having to plan it and know how to say it and believe that we've got to say it in a certain way. It's just letting it flow from your heart and know that the right words will always come from your heart. They don't always come from your mind when your mind's really busy about it, but they do come from your heart. And that just makes everything so much more simple. And I think when you know that you're coming from your heart, even if it sounds a bit clumsy afterwards, or you think, oh, did that? It doesn't matter, because it's done with love. And it will be received with love, hopefully. And that's what's transformational, I think. It's the feeling rather than the words.
I love that. It's the feeling rather than the words. That's really powerful. What about the understanding itself? We call it the understanding, which let me just share something with you, because I know how brilliant you are. What came up to me again in the middle of the night or the middle of the morning was that how funny is our language when we have this massive expansion of all of these possibilities of thoughts and feelings, and then in our own language, in our own culture, we narrow it down to a word. So we'll say the word love. That's one word to try to explain something that is beyond comprehension. And then we'll use the word depression. And depression is going to now label all of these feelings and emotions we've had that are just they're too far to possibly comprehend. And then we'll put it down in one little word like that.
And I think that's the power of language. Fortunately and unfortunately, I think for me, words, language allow us to communicate on a human level, but they're limiting as well. And I think words like depression, like I work in the eating disorder field in my NHS work, not so well, more so in the NHS. My wellbeing work is much broader than that. But when we put those words onto a human being, we start seeing that human being with different eyes, because we stop seeing the human and we start seeing the illness. And I think words are an absolute blessing when we're trying to convey something, and they can be really tricky in so much as it limits us in our understanding, in the way we understand the world and each other sometimes. And, I think I have a friend, Anthony, who talks about an eating disorder as a thinking disorder, because we create meaning from words. And I know for me, working in mental health at the moment, we have different diagnoses, and that diagnosis gives us some kind of, we think, understanding of how that human shows up, but it only ever gives us an understanding of the thinking that they're believing moment to moment. That's all it can ever give us. And I think when we get caught up in believing that somebody is depressed or is anorexic or is anxious, we narrow that person down to a tiny part of what they actually are and who they actually are. And so I think words can be incredible and really tricky sometimes.
The things that you say, I mean, as you're saying it, I can just feel the beauty in what you're saying, because as soon as you said diagnosis, my red flags go off. And the fact that the way you said that we narrow in on that person, and by calling someone anxious in that one moment that they experience anxiousness, it's hard to explain sometimes how incredible that is, how we're looking at a person in this one moment when we have hundreds of thousands of moments.
And endless possibilities of showing up differently in those moments.
Right. And this is just so mind-blowing. It really is. It's incredible.
And I think I love that phrase, mind-blowing, Dave, because our minds are limited, aren't they? So they're kind of easily blown. And yet, before, beyond, beneath our little minds, there's a whole expanse of wisdom, of opportunities, of being that can never be too big for us to feel. But it's only when we're in our minds, in our human beings, that it feels too much sometimes.
Why do you think that people find themselves caught up? I mean, they're coming to you because they don't, and this is, I'm taking this from my own personal experience, where it feels like I felt trapped or stuck, or what has come to me lately is the fact that there is, and this is all, of course, prior to this understanding, but this there is a flow. There's a natural flow that's happening.
Yeah.
Not that I was aware of it, but it happened anyway, whether I was aware of it or not. It was happening. And then, and the contrast between having a good day, which was interesting even to say a good day, because you could have a good or bad moment a million times in one day.
Yeah.
But we say, again, it's like a cultural thing. We say, oh, we had a good day, we had a bad day. And for me, looking back and thinking about it, it's like, it seemed like the bad times were the times that my mind was really caught up in thoughts, a whirlwind of thoughts, spiraling out of control thoughts. And it was because of the speed of these thoughts, the ones that are right after the other one, the negative thinking, the not knowing that other people could possibly experience that. Yeah. It's almost a trap, like I put myself in a cage and said, oh my gosh, not only does no one else feel this way, but there's also a category out there that says that you have depression. And so, okay, well, it makes perfect sense. Obviously, this is depression. I feel bad. So I'm going to go ahead and put myself in that category. Innocently, I followed the rules of society in a way. And I hope I'm not, coming across, for those that are suffering right now, taking their suffering lightly at all, because I'm not. It
No.
was an extremely scary time in those moments, not the whole day,
No.
just the moments. And so, but not recognizing that there was one moment that was good, bad, or not bad, but just strange. It was strange. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, to go and tell someone that this is a strange thing is happening, I'm like having a good time. I get in the car, I drive over to the therapist. Hey, how's it going? Good. How's your family? Great. Fantastic. Hey, what's up with you? I feel really bad. Are you ready? And then you sit down and you tell them about a past experience, because you're no longer in the present. You're going to go back to the past and say, hey, this is what happened. I didn't go out for the entire weekend. I stayed in bed. I slept the whole time. I didn't eat. So can you share in your experiences how, people are, and I'm just going to let you fly with that, right? So I think the idea for me is like people find themselves caught up in a diagnosis because there's a diagnosis out there.
Mm-hmm. I think what occurs to me is, of course, everybody will respond and react differently to a diagnosis, and they'll respond in their own unique way. And I think some people won't engage in the diagnosis in the same way as others. But what I see is often if we have a diagnosis, we almost start to make our whole being match that diagnosis. So we forget that diagnosis, because we're not told this, we're told that we have anxiety, we have depression, we are anxious. And so we create a meaning around that. And that meaning is, well, this is my identity. This is how I show up. This is how people experience me. And when we hold that as our identity for people to see, we then start to get a bit scared about showing up as a different identity. And so it keeps us trapped in that diagnosis. And I know that for me, when I had my diagnosis of anorexia nervosa, that was for me almost like a keep out sign. I've got anorexia nervosa. There you go. You can have a look at that, but don't look at me. And I think innocently people do see the diagnosis and they don't see the human being anymore. And so we get caught in this vicious cycle of they only see the diagnosis. I've got to be the diagnosis because that's what they're looking for. And then eventually we don't see that we are anything more than that diagnosis. And yet we are. I'll often say to people, if you go and look in your drawers for some pink socks, you can see a million pairs of black socks, but if you're only focused on finding the pink, you'll probably miss them. You'll miss the black. And if you come back with the pink socks and say, what the colour socks did you see? Oh, well, I only looked for pink. And we focus on what we're looking out for. And when we're looking out for signs of anxiety because that scares us, or signs of depression because that scares us, or whatever it is we're told that we have or are, that's what we're going to see. And yet, there's black socks, there's blue socks, there's pink socks, there's even some pants in there. That there's all sorts in the drawer, and there's all sorts to being human. And yet, when we're only looking for one tiny part, we cleverly as humans filter out the rest of the good stuff. And that for me is the sadness. And I think that for me is the way I work very differently since coming across this understanding, because of course I'm interested in the whole person, including their anxious thinking, including their sad thinking, including their depressed thinking. But I'm interested in all of that, and the healthy person, and the person that's got all the resilience that they could ever need. Because if you're going through depression or anxiety or any other difficulty, if you're waking up every morning and still here breathing, you've got resilience because you've got through another day. And it's about, let's look at that as well. Let's not just treat the depression. Let's treat a human being that has all sorts of immense aspects to them. And that for me is the difference in this. It sees so much more than that tiny part.
Wow, my heart melted. I mean, you are amazing. You're stunning. I can't thank you enough for being here, because that's going to be extremely helpful for people. It really is. There's a relationship with ourselves where we're looking at our identities, and we're truly innocently, really innocently, and that's something I think is so important to hear, is
Yeah.
that it is an innocent misunderstanding.
Always, always. Because if we could see something different, we would. So it's always innocent. And when we get caught up in our thinking, when we get caught up in our human experience, and we don't see the beauty beyond that, of course we're going to feel scared, or we're going to feel small, and we're going to feel anxious. If we could see more, we would. And I guess the way I see this is that, for you as a coach, for me as a coach, for all of us doing this work, it's about helping people to get curious about what else is there. What else is there beyond our thinking? What else is there beyond our human experience?
Curiosity is enormous, and to see, just to have that, it's just, how do you explain that to someone? Hey, stay curious. I mean it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, and it's as simple as that, isn't it? It's as simple and as easy and as difficult as staying curious. Because I think that the hardest thing to do is sometimes to acknowledge what we don't know. Because as human beings, I don't think we're very good at not knowing stuff. We don't sit easily with that often. And actually, let's just sit with what we don't know, because that's when the magic happens. That's when we start to see new stuff. If we only look at the direction of what we know, we're missing the direction of what we don't know. And that's the essence of this, I think.
Oh, that's so powerful. What else can you tell us about Sarah Parker and your work with the people that you've come across?
Well, what I can tell you about me is I'm a human being. I love working with people. I love being curious. I love helping people to see that they are so much more, that they are. I used to, and I still do sometimes, and I say to people, you've got everything you need within you. And then I realized one day, hang on a minute, how can you feel the magnificence of everything that's there available to us within us? You've got everything within you and without you and around you and above you and below you, because the universe is always providing to us, for us. We don't need to seek it out all the time. It'll come to us as and when we need it. And for me, it's about helping people to see that actually it's not about doing more, it's about doing less. And I, in the past, was very good at doing more, Dave. Very good at doing more. And did lots to try and be good enough. And it's really interesting, isn't it, how I worked hard at school, I went to university, I got a job. I thought that doing was going to make me enough. And interestingly, now I see that I always was enough without doing anything. And we live in a society where we strive, and we think that we need the big house or the fancy car or the good job, and without all of that stuff, we're born with none of that, and still we're enough. And I think Sarah Parker in the past would have said, well, I hope to have a good job, and I hope to do this, and I hope to do that. And now, Sarah Parker now, having learned an awful lot through my life, says, I'll do it when I want to do it. And if I want to have a day doing nothing, and not striving and not being anything other than being, then that's cool too. And I think the Sarah Parker now that shows up not as a counsellor, not as an EMDR therapist, not with all that learning that was somebody else's idea, great as it is, but I show up as a human. When I show up to work, I show up, I hope, with humour, with warmth, with me, because why would I hide any of that? You know, part of my counselling training was almost, well, you're almost like a blank card and you don't say anything about you just listen and respond to what you hear. And of course, I listen deeply and respond, but I respond from my heart, and that means bringing all of me. You know, it means bringing some humour sometimes. I will bring, Dave, whatever it needs to create a space of connection. And I don't know what that is with each individual. I'll only know when I'm in that space with them. And that's so much simpler than it used to be, without the rules of how to show up and what to wear and what you should and shouldn't say. I show up and I see what occurs to me. And on a rough day, I show up and I'm in my head sometimes. And that's okay too. Because when I'm in my head and busy, I know that it won't feel right. And that's a great indicator to me that I'm in my head. And as soon as that starts showing up, that's wisdom in action. Because it just lets me know, oh, you're caught up in your thinking again. You're not going to do the best job here. Just let things settle. Just listen. Just be.
No, I love the way you were saying Sarah Parker is this now. And I thought, oh my gosh, how brilliant is that? Because it's for me, it's like it's knowing that we are so much more than the identity of Sarah Parker or Dave Fry. It's, I mean, who we truly are is so expansive and so beautiful and so amazing and so full of infinite possibilities. And then we start closing in. We close it in with Dave Fry. We close it in with
whoever.
You start the labels, and we just start closing it into, and like you said, the job and the house, and if those are all so seriously important, I'm in trouble. So,
Absolutely.
but I know that I'm not. I mean, I know the depth of love that's within me is just enormous, and so it's fascinating, just fascinating. Now, what happens when someone comes to you, and the way I used to be with my depression, because I followed a system, and the system told me, hey, you could very well have depression. Are you having these symptoms? Yeah, I'm having those exact symptoms. And when I share it with someone else that I know that has depression, the languages that we share back and forth is almost identical. And so it's like, well, that's obvious. It's more obvious now that I am part of that description. And we move down the line, and then someone comes along and goes, no one can make you happy. Your happiness comes from within. And then my head implodes instead of explodes. It implodes and says, you don't know me. You don't know what I go through. You don't know what I'm experiencing. You have no idea what's going on in here. I am every thought that I experience. I am the thought that happens. And when it's a dark thought, that means I am that dark thought. And what I would love to do, I'd love to go back and shake myself and say, if you're the dark thought, Dave, then that means you could be the opposite of that dark thought. And if as dark as thoughts have you've gotten in the past, that means that the potential for you to have a brilliant, eye-opening insight is always there too. And I just find that really fascinating that for whatever reason I've put the label on myself And I lived that story. That was my story, and I lived it very well.
Absolutely. And I think, you know what? That's understandable, isn't it? When somebody tells you that, when you meet somebody else that also has been told the same, and yes, lo and behold, we have similar symptoms. Oh my goodness, we must be this. And it's that seeking evidence to prove what we believe. And so it's understandable that you do that. And by the way, don't go back and shake yourself. Give yourself a hug. Go back and give yourself a hug and say, yeah, of course you thought like this, but you know what? You don't need to think like that. There's other thoughts that come in. There's other parts of you. Be gentle with yourself today. But I think, you know, when we see the impersonal nature of thoughts, they're all just thoughts. And I think, and I don't know if anybody ever taught me this, Dave, or if I just somehow picked it up that, you know, a bit like when you're little, you draw a heart and believe that's love. It's almost like you have a brain and you believe that's where the thoughts come from. How do we know where they come from? How do we know? They're not us. They're not what we make. And I often say to people, I have this really random thought, and I don't know what your rubbish bin collection system is over in the States, but in the UK we have these big wheelie bins that once a week we each take onto the side of the road, and they come and pick them up and empty them and leave them. We bring them back in. Every day, if I walk down the street on bin day, Dave, I can guarantee you I'll see somebody's bin and I'll have this thought, I could nick that bin, I could steal it, I could take that bin. Now, I don't need any bins. I've got 3 bins. Don't need any more bins. I have never nicked a bin, never taken one ever. Don't think I ever will. And yet, this habitual thought pops up. Now, if I thought I was my thinking, I'd believe I was a thief. And I believe I would pinch somebody's bin and I'd have a garden full of somebody else's wheelie bins. but who knows where that bin thought comes from? I don't know. But it doesn't matter, because it's just some random bit of energy that comes in and goes again. It would only be meaningful if I held onto it and put meaning onto it. Other than that, it's just some ridiculous thought. We're not going to pinch anyone's bins. I don't want their bins. Thank you very much. If I get a new bin, I'll have a new one. But do you see the impersonal nature of our thought? Until somebody tells us, actually, your thinking isn't coming from you. It doesn't mean anything about you. It's just a load of energy that's coming through you. It's passing through you. We start to believe we are our thinking. But when we learn that we're not, we learn that it's just impersonal stuff that flows around everybody, in and about and up and down, then we can see it doesn't mean anything about who we are or how we are. So there you go. That's my secret life of my thoughts about pinching bins.
So awesome. It's so great. You know, and we could have, oh my gosh, to write down all of those random habitual thoughts. And habitual is important to talk about, because we have thoughts that repeat themselves, and we don't even recognize it sometimes. But yeah. I can guarantee you that we all have habitual thoughts. Absolutely. Yeah. It's really obvious. And then there's these new thoughts that show up that for me are just absolutely stunning. They're just incredible. So can you talk about those new thoughts?
I guess they're what comes through. They're what I would talk about as wisdom, as intellect. And for me, if it's the thought we've had before, it's not a thought that pertains to the present moment. It's something to do with the past. So it's not about the here and now. And for me, wisdom is always showing up in the here and now. So like, if I'd have planned how I was going to respond to you, if you'd have given me the questions and I'd have written it all down and I was writing it and then reading it out now, I'd likely be stumbling over my words because it wouldn't be wisdom coming up in the moment. I mean, some people might not think it's wisdom, but it's a new experience for me, coming up, coming up, coming up. But as soon as I get into my habitual stuff that's belonging to the past, it's nowhere near as helpful for the here and now because it was only helpful back then. There's a whole new pool of new wisdom, new kind of helpfulness that comes up moment to moment. And I can't plan for that. I don't need to plan for it because it sits there, and it sits there beyond my human mind. It sits there beyond my thinking. And yes, it shows up as thought because that's how we experience it as humans, but it's a different quality of thought. There's a newness to it. There's a relevance to the here and now. There's a different kind of feeling to it. You know, habitual thought is, oh, here it comes again, or I know this stuff, so this is what I'll do. We don't really think it through. We don't really kind of settle into it. We respond quickly. You know, it's, oh, I know this. I know what I do in this situation. I'll do it. Whereas there's a different quality to that wisdom that shows up when our thinking settles because it's always pertinent to the here and now. It's always relevant for what we need now. And then if we let it pass, in the next moment, new wisdom is always available to show up. But it's about letting our human minds, our thinking settle so that it can rise up.
That's beautiful, and I love the way you speak and the way you share this. This is really incredible. Do you ever find that there are certain times during your day or whatever you're doing that creativity comes through that seems to be more often? Like for me, it's when I'm driving a car and my hands are on the wheel and my mind is paying attention to everything around me. But then there's an opening because my mind is preoccupied with safety. Let's be safe and driving. There seems to be an opening, and I'm not telling people that this is going to happen for them. I'm saying that for me, I've noticed it a couple times where my body and my mind are preoccupied. There's a space, an opening there.
The space between.
Then then all of a sudden things show up that like you said, there's a feeling. There's a feeling that says that this is not me, that this is truly something that is showing up for me. It's arising or arriving from this this energy, this mysterious energy, and it has this beautiful life of its own. And there's times where I'm like, I need to record this. I need to record this. And sometimes I'll like pull over and then write stuff down because what shows up is again, it's like, wow. I mean, I've written stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end that there's no way that would have, you're not planning it, right? It's not like I'm going to go for a drive and at mile marker 20, I'm going to write a book. You
mean you don't make those plans, Dave?
You couldn't predict this in a million years, and yet stuff shows up. So does that happen for you?
Absolutely. And you know where it is most often? There's two things. Either if I'm out walking or running, just because I'm just in the moment, I'm just out there doing my thing. Or, and this is the most often, in a shower in the morning. And I'll just be in the shower and my mind will just be flowing and wandering and something will pop up. And the day hasn't started, so I'm not into it, I'm not thinking about it, I'm just there. And the first shower of the day for me is often the space where just newness comes up, and I love it. You know, and it's a bit like going to Narnia, where I can go in the shower and I can have no concept of how long I've been in there. Because my mind will just be doing its thing without me controlling it, without me making anything happen. It'll just be doing its thing. And it'll be, a thought that pops up about, oh, yeah, I could do that. Or, oh, yeah, that looks like that now. It's just the simplicity of letting ourselves be free within our minds, not trying to control or direct or drive it, just opening it up to just being. And I love that about being in the shower, And often I'll think, did I just shampoo my hair or not? Because my mind's just been busy daydreaming, Yeah, it's a lovely space for me in the morning.
I heard somewhere, and it was a video on a young man that was more like a savant, and he was maybe like 8 years old. And they don't say this exactly, but you get the drift that he was having these insights all the time. And so the parents redid the shower, and they made it to where he could use a black wax crayon. So because he was in that shower, he was experiencing something that was showing up for him. Again, he was just in a relaxed state of mind. He probably forgot to use soap and, to shampoo his hair, because they showed these markings, these mathematical equations in the shower. And, at 9 years old, he's teaching college level. So it's like what shows up for him just came through him. And I love that, because that happens for me too. So it's, there's certain times where it happens more often than not, but I would never say, hey, to someone, you have to drive a car in order to experience this, because I've also experienced it at 4 o'clock in the morning when I woke up this morning. I also experience it when I'm in chaos.
Yeah.
Now, I've noticed that too. When I'm in chaos, my mind's really wound up. I also notice that there's a space within all that chaotic happening.
The space between.
But what I see in that is, even, in the peaceful times, but even in the chaos, wisdom's always trying to rise up. That's the thing. It's not that you have to work to make wisdom show up. It's the opposite. And even in chaos and in quiet, it'll show up. It'll try its hardest always to be our best guide.
Yeah, that's amazing. It really is amazing. Again, where I hope that this podcast reaches people who are suffering and feeling like I did in the past, where it's like you had said, it seems like it's an identity, and it's so far from the truth, so far from the truth. And yet we have a system that's in play that they'll take you down into that system. And what you and I are hoping, I'm speaking for you right now, but we're hoping that this understanding can be shared with everyone, including the people who are doing the work in our standard methods of therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, until I came across this understanding, I would, in my work, speak to the illness, speak to the poor mental health, speak to that part of a person, because I thought that was what I had to treat. So it's an innocent misunderstanding. But actually, when you see that the ill health isn't the thing, there's still a human that's resilient, that has the ability to come through and get through whatever. If they're still alive, they're resilient. And when we speak to that person, that's where we direct the person's attention to, not the suffering, but, and it's not saying we don't recognize that there is suffering, but we're saying that, and we recognize the resilience and the strength in every human being. It's pointing out both bits, not just focusing on the illness. Because if we focus only on that, well, then the person's going to think that's all they are. If we ignore a whole part of a human being that's incredible, then the chances are they'll continue ignoring it, which is really sad. You know, I share this understanding because it makes sense. It feels right. And because it sees much more than that narrow point of view that we often see in services at the moment. And as I say, you know, I know that each human being is doing the best they can with the thinking that they have. And if they've not seen the amazing insights of this understanding brings, I guess they're going to carry on doing what they do. And still they're doing it with the best of interests, with the best of intentions, and hopefully with love. And we all are doing that until we see something new, and then we can do something different. And that's what I'm doing, Dave. I've seen something and I'm doing something different. And I'm glad I am. And I can still love myself for not having seen it earlier. Who knows why I didn't, but I've seen it now.
That is so beautiful, because when this understanding hit home for me, that initial feeling was so, it rocked my world. It rocked my world. And the day after, I was actually impressed with the fact that my mind didn't go back to the past and say, you wasted 34 years.
Yeah.
I could actually recognize the fact that depressive thought that I would have had the day earlier didn't show up. And I was like, wow. I mean, it's just,
it's amazing.
It really is amazing. It's amazing, and it's transformational. It's life-changing. You and I both are living proof of a resilience that at one point in our lives, we did not know it was there. And so if we could, you know, I'll tell everyone who's listening to this that you have amazing resilience. It's stunning. It's incredible. Again, I'm limited to the words because.
And for all of those people that come back and say, no, I haven't got resilience, what would you say to them, Dave?
What would I say to someone? I would say that I'm gonna quote Sarah Parker. If you're alive, if you're breathing, you have amazing resilience.
Yeah. And I think just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And I know for me, in the past, one of my favourite phrases would have been, oh, I can't cope with this, because I didn't see that I had resilience. And now, of course I can cope. It might not be pretty, you know, might be a little bit messy, in fact, while I'm getting through something that feels tricky. And then when I rest back into my wisdom and my resilience, it's all good. We don't need to define what resilience looks like, I don't think. It's just getting through. And we all do that beautifully and perfectly, even if our human minds don't think it's perfect. Of course it is.
Let me ask you about trauma. So you work with people that have experienced trauma.
Yeah.
My question is, like, the diagnosis again will pinpoint, we'll take this vast expansion of incredible possibilities of thinking and our feelings and our experiences of our thinking, and then they'll put it in this category, and they'll bring it down to this little word here, and we'll have anxiety, and I know the DSM-5 has over 360 disorders now. Then there's trauma. My question is, how does how do you work with someone that has experienced a traumatic experience, but is it totally different than the person categorized with depression?
No, no. The way I see it, Dave, and again, this is just the way I see it, but when somebody experiences a trauma in that moment, of course, it's awful. It's awful. And who knows what that trauma might be for them, and we all experience traumatic events slightly differently. But what I would say is something in that moment carries them through, thankfully. And our human minds, in their attempt to help us, will give us some learning from that. Don't get into that situation again because this will happen. Or if you think like this, that'll keep you safe. Or if you drink alcohol, you'll forget about the trauma and you'll be fine. All of those habits and things that come from traumatic events, if you have a nightmare, have a drink, take some drugs, get involved in obsessive exercise, starve yourself, binge or purge, whatever it might be. Our minds are desperately trying to help us through. Unfortunately, that very quickly becomes learned behavior or habits. And what I would say is, when we've experienced a trauma, it's dreadful. And in the here and now, when we're not in that trauma, the only way that trauma can show up is in our thinking. It isn't a risk to us anymore. We're not in that situation. That situation's in the past and it's gone. But of course, it feels hard to remember it. And understandably, when we think about that trauma, when it's in our awareness, we're going to feel it. Because that's how we work as humans.
Yes.
We're going to feel it and it's going to be awful. And we're still safe because we're not in that trauma. We're in a whole load of thinking about it. And when we're in it, we're in it. But if we're in that movie screen and it's here, it looks like we're truly in it. If we can see, oh God, my mind's playing that story again, that awful story that was an event in the past, and we see it with the observer of it rather than the liver of it, it takes on a different view, and we can see the impersonal nature of it, and we're not at risk from that. Like watching a horror movie, we feel the fear, we feel the suspense, we feel whatever we're watching, and still we're not at risk, and still we're not in that horror movie. But the power of our thought to create the feelings, even though the event's not happening anymore, is immense. And so for me, it's helping people to see the power of our thought in bringing that event, what looks like back to life in the here and now. It can never be, can only ever be brought back as feelings from our thinking. And when we can start to gently get curious about that and start to see that, we know that whilst we might feel horrendous from that memory that arises in our thoughts, we're not in that place anymore. And we can see that we're safe. And we can see that we don't need all of those behaviours or those habitual thoughts that we used to try and keep ourselves safe. We are safe. Of course, our minds try and keep us safe. Thank goodness. And yet, that kind of can be part of the continuing of the suffering, unnecessarily so.
That's incredible. Again, thank you so much for your service.
It's only how I see it, Dave. And I guess there will be a lot of people that disagree with me, and that's cool. That's fine. But I truly see that when we are stepped back a little bit from our experiencing of our thinking, we have more clarity to see. That's not right now. That's back then. And it was awful. and nobody's denying that. And right now, let's look at you right now. Let's look at where you are. Let's look at who you are. Let's look at the resilience that's brought you through to today.
We are amazing human beings. We really are. And there's such enormous love and compassion from within us, even during the times of chaos. And especially this understanding brings forth such openness and open arms to ourselves. And I think that's really important also, is just knowing that we're talking about something from within ourselves. And a couple times I've had this thought that shows up that said, if I could tell a young person that is being inundated by social media and parents and friends and just the enormous amounts of information that's being presented to them. What if you could just clean the slate every morning? Like every morning you woke up, you could clean the slate of everything that you thought was important yesterday. Now that is one way of saying that, but what we've learned from this understanding is that we have that same opportunity in any given moment.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, what? Hello? How come no one ever told me this? I should have learned this in kindergarten. But in kindergarten, we didn't really need it because
we weren't collecting the words on our whiteboard, were we?
No, we weren't.
We didn't have those clever brains that remembered and put meaning to stuff. We were just living.
We were just living as kids.
Yeah. There was no whiteboard. There were no words. We just lived it, let it go. Lived it, let it go. And then sometime we learned to write, and we learned to remember, and we learned to put it on that whiteboard, and we learned to not rub it off. And we thought that was all right, because that gives us intelligence, right? And it gives us, and don't get me wrong, whiteboards with words on are great for maths, for English, for whatever you want to hold on to that might serve you. But we also put stuff on there, don't we, that doesn't serve us at all. And nobody shows us where the eraser is. I love that analogy, Dave. Love that analogy. It's a brilliant analogy. I'm going to run with that one. I'm going to steal that one from you.
You can have it. It just showed up. It's not mine.
But that's the beauty of this, isn't it? That's the beauty of it. Who knows what's going to come up in the conversation? But something always does.
Something always does. 100%.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that.
How can people get in touch with you?
So they can get in touch with me if they go onto my website, which is wellbeing.co.uk, and there's a little section on there where you can put in your email address, you can send me a message, and I will always respond. That's probably the easiest way. There's also on the website my telephone number's on there, so you can get in touch with me by phone, by WhatsApp, by text, whatever they choose. But it's all on the website, which is wellbeing.co.uk. And just as I'm .co.uk, Dave, as you well know, we reach across the world with the wonders of Zoom and modern technology. Don't let where you are in the world limit you either. Don't let the fact that you're not in America stop you from contacting Dave Fry. Don't let the fact that you're not in the UK stop you from contacting Sarah Parker. We're all connected.
We are all connected.
We are indeed, Dave, and I'm so glad we are. And you know what? I'm so glad we've been connected today in this.
Me too, and I really appreciate your time. And it's very important that we share this understanding and continue to share this understanding, continue to share the connection that we all have. And I've had horrible days, and I've had wonderful days, and yet that resilience has always been there. I think I'll name this podcast Resilience.
Oh, brilliant.
And we'll share it to as many people as possible. And hopefully we can continue sharing and getting people interested and curious.
Curious. Yes, curious. That's all they need, a bit of curiosity. Just to listen out something new.
So thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you and your service to others. Can't thank you enough. This has been an honor.
And likewise, I have loved sharing with you and getting to know you a bit more and just being in this space with you. Thank you, Dave. I really mean that. Thank you.
The space between.
All right, let me ask you another question about trauma. Now, you and I know that's very serious. The event was very serious.
Yeah.
And yet, when you talked about the bins, there was a thought that shows up. First off, you don't even know why the thought shows up. Yeah. But then it shows up and it repeats itself, like when you go on a walk. Same with me. Now, this past Christmas, I had a thought that showed up that was like on time for Christmas, but I haven't heard it since the last Christmas. But this time when it showed up, I was like completely aware of it. When it showed up, I was like, oh my gosh, it's you? You're showing up again? I haven't seen you in 12 months.
That thought must have a calendar.
I mean, it's stunning how the repeating is strange, how it will show up in literally a year later.
Yeah.
So, but my question more is like the bin, the repeating of the bin thought, even if you didn't know how that bin thought showed up, with trauma, obviously, those thoughts are going to show up again.
Yeah.
It's strange because there's no obvious to the bin thought. There's no real obvious to it, but it's funny. It's now funny to you. And that's the beautiful thing about this understanding is that these thoughts that show up over and over again, and they have their own kind of signature to them, they can be really funny at times because it's like, oh my gosh, you're showing up again. And, but back to the trauma is that we know it's very, very likely that person is going to experience that thinking again. Yeah. And we're sharing that we know you're going to experience that again. And yet it's not really that different in the technical part of it. That thought showing up again is no different than the bin thought showing up again. No, I'm not saying that I'm not taking away from the seriousness of the trauma. I'm not doing that. But you see where I'm going.
What I hear you doing is actually, I hearing what you're saying is all thoughts are equal. It's only when we put more significance on them that they have more meaning. So of course, as a human being, one of the things, Dave, that I often say, if I'm working with somebody that's struggling with food or weight, and I'll say, but you know what, whether you have a biscuit or a grape, is that thought that you have around that is no more or less significant than what colour pants you put on in the morning. It's because our brains have learned to put significance on that. And I think, as you say really, really well, our brains do that with trauma thoughts. Oh God, this is a big one. It must be important. It's another thought that's passing through. It's another bundle of energy. But we've hung our coats and our hats on it and said, got to watch this one. And actually, we don't. It's the thought that if we can let it come and go, it will bother us much less. You know, when we talk about this new understanding or this understanding, it's been around for forever. It's just that, you know, humans don't always see it this clearly. You know, we know we have thoughts. We know we have consciousness to look at those thoughts. We know that we have busy minds and we have a lot of experiences. And actually being in this present moment is the only place to be, the only place we can ever be. And that's been taught for so long. And the idea of not being the sum total of our human experience, it's been around for so long, and yet we easily forget it because we get really clever, don't we, at technology and at new learning and at science, and we forget the age-old wisdom that's always been there for us.
Yeah, we forget.
And even though we forget it, it doesn't let us down.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Dave.
This has been amazing, just mind-blowing, and
beautiful.
Thank you for saying yes. And
thank you for asking.
You know, I hope we reach as many people as we can possibly reach.
Me too. And if we don't reach them, we'll do another, Dave.
Do another one.
It's all right. We'll keep going till we've reached them all.
That sounds fantastic. Again, thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been a joy, and it's been lovely to spend this time with you, and I shall look forward to speaking again soon.
Great. That's fantastic. Me too.
Keep in touch, Dave. Take care.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. The fact that I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and could not go back to sleep because this thing was like, hey, you know that idea about the book? And I was like,
sorry, Dave.
I was like, yes, are we going to do that right now? And it's like going,
yeah, we are.
Guess what? You should probably write this down or record this on a voice memo. So I have like 3 voice memos, and I actually did some writing, which it's actually, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with what shows up with us.
Yeah.
I am truly impressed.
Yeah.
So
you never know, do you? You never know. You couldn't plan it if you wanted to.
No, and you know what? This is going to be such an amazing conversation. You wrote numpty.
Yes.
How do you say that?
Numpty. Numpty just means that I'm a bit stupid when it comes to technology.
Yeah, you know, the computer has like its own language. It has these sounds that pop up, and it's like,
I don't know what that sound is.
Just connecting as humans.
I know it. I really do. I appreciate that so much.
Huh. Well, thank you. And I'm like,
yeah.
You just got to keep going. Just keep going.
You have. That's all you've got to do.
Yeah. For everyone.
Do you want my full name, or do you just want Sarah Parker?
Let's go with Sarah Parker.
Sarah Parker.
How do you say well of being?
Just like that. Well of being.
Well of being.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going to happen.
Let's just go for it and see what shows up.
There's so many things that you say that are just like, another podcast. Oh my gosh, this is 1 out of 15 podcasts. It's incredible. You can raise a hand. You can wave your hands back and forth.
Beautiful. I love that.
You can see where this could it's just endless podcasting. I mean,
absolutely.
It's unbelievable.
Let's keep going till people are bored of us. Oh God, them again.
Yeah, I want that. I want that where they're like, oh, not these guys again.
We'll know we've got out there, and we'll know we've got the message across when people are sick of listening.
One of the things I love about wearing a mask is that I can talk to myself anywhere, and no one thinks, oh, that guy's lost it.
Yes.
So I kind of really like the mask. And
Sarah Parker.